Good morning and welcome to the career session for BME PhDs. My name is Rita Livriado. I'm a faculty in biomedical engineering at The Ohio State University. I'm also a member of the board of directors. Last year, for the first time, we did an experiment where we started the session to cater to the needs of our BME PhD students and postdoctoral trainees. We noticed that there is a lot of interest. In this year, we also did the same things. We assembled a panel of experts in academia and industry who have their PhDs in BME and are here to give you advice on how to best prepare to land the job, a good job, a job either in industry or in academia. And of course, some of you may end up in government positions or alternative career paths. So this session is going to be different from other sessions from the point of view that each one of the speakers, two from industry and two from academia, will give a 10-minute PowerPoint slide presentation. Then we are going to have a 5-minute questions by the audience. And then after we finish the four speakers, then we're going to have half an hour where each person in the audience can ask anything they want to the panel of the four panelists, and whoever from the panel feels they are more appropriate to answer the question, or you can direct the question to a particular person in the panel. So I would like to credit for this session my co-organizer, Ms. Terry Young. Terry, please stand up for people to know you. She is the Director of Career Programs and Meetings at the Biomedical Engineering Society, and she is the one who has been behind all this effort to create this session last year and this year. Thank you, Terry. And I will start with my first presenter. My first presenter is Dr. Cynthia Clegg. She is the Director of Research and Advanced Technology at Medtronic Coronary and Structural Heart in Minnesota. Dr. Clegg got her bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering from Northwestern University, doctorate in biomedical engineering from the University of Minnesota. She has been working at Medtronic in different divisions of Medtronic, perfusion systems, cardiac surgery technologies, and currently in coronary and structural heart. She has over 20 patents, and she has been inducted as a technical fellow in Medtronic and also in the Bacon Society, an honor society where very few people in the 60-plus year history of Medtronic belong to. Also, this year she has been inducted as an AMB fellow. Thank you, Dr. Clegg.
Just give me a second to get the slides up here. Great. Can everybody hear me okay? Nice to see a crowd full, room full of people. And thanks for the invitation, Rita. And nice to meet Gilda again, who's the incoming president for AMB. So I met her this spring, and nice to make those connections over time. So knowing this is a room full of PhDs in BME, I'm presuming there's already great commitment to the field of biomedical engineering. And knowing that if you're in this room, you're trying to decide industry, academia. And so today I want to help share my experience and go through these four topics to help address that interest and issue. So I'll spend a little bit of time talking about my own experience and path in industry, talk about knowing if industry is the right match for you, experiences that will help you prepare for a career in industry, and what industry looks for in a new PhD graduate. So one aspect of my path in this industry is my training and education, which Rita gave a brief overview of. I started with my BS in mechanical engineering, but it was all with biomedical emphasis. So I was a mechanical engineer taking organic chemistry at Northwestern University. And I spent one summer in Minnesota as internship at St. Jude Medical with their carbon valves at the time. So kind of funny that 25 years later I'm back into the valve business. But Upon finishing my undergraduate degree, I actually did a little bit of a detour, worked a couple of years in the aerospace industry, which was fascinating and challenging, but in the end, did I feel good working on Star Wars programs and killer satellites and things like that. So I got back to my first love, which was the biomedical engineering, and entered the PhD program at the University of Minnesota, focused on fluid mechanics there, and had an internship in grad school with Medtronic Biomedicus in there, working on their cardiac bypass pump. And that was my entree into Medtronic then. When I was finished up a year later, they had a position open, and I've been at Medtronic for 22 years since then. Never thought I'd stay that long, but it's been a good road. So another aspect of my path has been the range of products I've worked on. I like to describe to people, I've worked on products all cardiac from the outside in. I started in our perfusion business, and that was working on blood and blood handling outside of the heart, so all our cardiac bypass and blood management equipment, disposables and the capital equipment involved with that. From there, I started working on the surface of the heart when I transferred into our cardiac surgery technologies group at the time, which was all about devices for beating heart surgery. So I worked with stabilizers and positioners to enable bypass surgery on the beating heart. And then my last big move in Medtronic is towards the inside of the heart, so I've been working on heart valves and other structural heart devices, and primarily in the transcatheter valves. So another aspect of my path has been the roles I've had. And in Medtronic, and I think in the industry in general, we talk about 3 different paths you can have as a technical person in Medtronic. One is what we call individual contributor, so you're very focused on the technology, the engineering, the technical aspects of the work. Another is the project leader, so you'll be leading like a technical project, but then you're also leading the people and defining the plans for the project. And a third category is people manager, so having people reporting into you that are working on projects and individual contributors. And a nice part about being in industry is I've had all 3 of those roles, and I've rotated among them. And even in my role now, which is primarily as a people manager, I still wear all 3 of those hats. So I get to keep my fingers in the technical part as well as some of the project leading aspects. So my path has been about my training, my education, the roles I've had, the range of products I've worked on. So how do you know that industry is right for you? It's been a great mix for me. And one way to know industry is right for you is if you're passionate about impacting lives. One of the things that's kept me at Medtronic so long is its strong integrity and also the mission, which is a very big part of the organization. And the passion about impacting lives is represented in Medtronic's mission statement, which hasn't changed in the last 50 years. And the first tenet of which is to contribute to human welfare by application of biomedical engineering in the research, design, manufacture, and sale of instruments or appliances that alleviate pain, restore health, and extend life. And one example of that in real life for us is just this weekend, the Twin City Marathon, and there's a group of global heroes from Medtronic. And these are a group of people who are participating in the running events that have been impacted by medical technology, Medtronic technology. So they wouldn't be able to run except for what biomedical engineering has done for them. And then, I personally have experienced this. My own mother-in-law received one of our core valve transcatheter aortic valves that I had been working on for years, and it made the difference for her. So very personal impact. You want to make sure you're doing a good job. Another way to know if industry is right for you is if you enjoy working on teams. Medical device development truly is a team sport. You can't do it alone. It takes being connected to the clinician and patients and knowing what they need. It takes working with multiple disciplines. For instance, in the transcatheter valves, it's made up of tissue and nitinol and delivery systems. So we work with mechanical engineers, material scientists, tissue engineers, and then the functions. To get a device out in industry, you have to navigate a regulatory path, the clinical pathway, the quality requirements, the R&D requirements. So, You know, in a large development team, you have all those functions represented. So you have to be able to enjoy working with a lot of people and depending on other people to get things done. So another way you know if industry is right for you is if you love to learn and develop. There's really never been a dull moment for me. It's a potential for a lifetime of learning and growing, and in 3 broad areas. Technical skills. I mean, I came in with my PhD knowledge and experience, but I've had to learn every day since then, and you have to keep up with the technology, and you're learning new things as you're working. People skills is another piece I've had to learn. You know, I came in being able to get along with people, but then I had to learn how to work with them more in a functional team and start mentoring and coaching and leading different people. So, and I'm still working on my people skills and developing it going forward. And the third piece being business skills, because in the end, industry is there to make money. And Medtronic, you know, it's about the patients and what we're delivering, but also part of the mission statement is making a fair profit so that we can keep the business going and return money to our stakeholders. So you need to understand, you know, the impact of the business, why you would go after something, the markets, the finance, the strategy, and that a lot I've learned on the job. So, you know, there's 3 ways to know industry is right for you. If you love to learn and develop, if you like working on teams, and if you're passionate about impacting people. So what experience will help you prepare for a job in industry? So one experience is to be able to communicate your knowledge. I mean, you in your PhD programs probably know more about your dissertation topic than anybody else. But can you tell somebody else who's not familiar with it what that is? I mean, you have to be able to communicate to non-technical people the work you're doing and what it means. I like to think about it as you're translating your detailed science into an action. You know, being able to say what you're working on and then so what about what you're working on? What does it matter and what's the impact? You know, often in my job, I'm explaining why it's important to spend time researching something, what's going to be the bottom line and the impact down the road. I have to prepare a pitch for the research projects we undertake. For instance, you know, I'm responsible for some of the tissue aspects of our valves, and I have to make a pitch for, yeah, we need to spend the money to buy this equipment to measure the biaxial properties of this tissue because we need to know it to satisfy the FDA to get this device out the market. So it's very important to be able to communicate what you know. Another experience to help you prepare is to spend time with clinicians and patients. Until you get out into the field and see how they're using it and see what challenges the clinicians have to deal with, you don't really understand what your problems you're trying to solve. So you need to get out there, understand the environment, understand the challenges, and understand the needs that they have. Because sometimes they can't tell you, they can't articulate it, but you, with your engineering mind, you go out there and you watch them and you immediately see, oh, this could really help. If only they had a tool that would do this, that would make life a lot easier. And another experience that'll help you prepare for industry is practicing your people skills. As I said, if medical device development is a team sport, you need to know how to work with people. And you know, in your graduate work, in your life in the community, there's lots of ways you can get that experience through team activities and collaboration, leadership roles, volunteering, mentoring and teaching. I know there's also opportunities to be part of capstone projects or sort of biodesign teams. That's some of the best practical experience you can have to get an idea what it's like to go into industry, so I highly recommend those. So if you have experiences of communicating your knowledge, practicing your people skills, then what? You know, what does industry look for in new PhD graduates? You know, one criteria is Medtronic's leadership expectations. And they talk about leadership for everybody. I mean, everybody comes in and has their own role in leadership. So we have 4 pillars of that. So shaping, engage, innovate, and achieve. So this is kind of not only the what you're doing, but how you're doing it. So we're very committed to being experts in what we do and have a clear vision of where we're going. Engaging is about engaging with the people around you as well as the clinicians and understanding what's needing to do and tapping everybody's talent and perspectives. And innovate is about new ideas and bringing solutions forward that benefit the patients, our partners, and customers. And achieve is about doing what you say you're going to set out to do. You know, being able to lay out a plan, this is what I'm going to do, this is what I'm going to deliver, and then following through with it. And then there's also what do I look for in candidates and new PhD graduates. So I have a little pun on there, what I like to see in candidates. So I look for capability. I mean, do you know your topics? Do you know your domain knowledge? And the competence is how comfortable you are sharing that and applying it and delivering it into a different arena. You know, have you demonstrated your collaboration skills? Do you know how to reach outside of yourself? Will you tap all the expertise that would be available to you working in industry? And then, you know, you've got to keep up your curiosity. I mean, one of the great things about this field is that we don't know everything, so we have to discover it. And there's a certain feeding of the curiosity in order to make a better product. Always ask, how could this be better? What else could we do to advance it? And then finally, commitment. It's hard work, but it's very rewarding work. So will you be able to stick with it and be persistent, especially my end of the R&D world, the research end, it can be very frustrating because sometimes it doesn't work. But if you're committed to where you're going and what you're doing, it's all worth it in the end. So if you're passionate about impacting lives, if you enjoy working on teams, if you love to learn and develop, you know, a fantastic career awaits you in the biomedical industry. Thank you. I can't speak how common it is across all the different programs, but I know at Medtronic we have a fair number of graduate interns as well as undergraduate, partly because we're so close to the University of Minnesota here and it has a very strong biomed program. But in my group right now I have a grad student intern who's, you know, maybe 25% time. So it's a nice way to mix the two, especially if you're just in the middle of writing a dissertation. Sometimes you need a break, go work in a lab. But I think it's a really great experience, especially if you want to get a taste for what industry would be like and if you're trying to decide between industry and academia. And the role I got at Biomedical was very closely aligned to my dissertation work, which was on blood flow and blood trauma, and that was a key piece they were working on in the bypass pump at the time. So it was a very nice match for a 3-month stint. Yep.
Are there any certificates or training that you think would help someone who's trying to make that switch from the academic mindset to be able to succeed in industry?
I don't know necessarily certificates. In terms of the communication piece, I know a piece that really helped me was I joined a Toastmasters group because I was deathly afraid of speaking and oral presentation. So getting over that and then learning how to communicate better my ideas was, I think, very valuable for me moving into a career in industry. I think opportunities you have to work together on a team, on a design project, or some other activities around is another great experience to have. And I think a key piece is translating sort of the activities you did in graduate school, being able to say, oh, this applies to this kind of skill I would apply in industry. Yeah?
Since we focus on such special topics, is there anything that we can do to make this a little more well-rounded when it comes to industry development?
Yeah, and obviously if you're coming out with a PhD, you'd be looking for a position that was related to your topic. That would be the ideal. But I think also, you know, for instance, one of my recent hires, you know, I needed somebody who could do a lot of imaging analysis, and it wasn't directly related to their PhD work, but they had applied it. They'd used that skill in another area, and they were familiar with the cardiac space and the valve space, so they could say, these were the items of my dissertation work that then I can immediately apply into the role.
My next speaker is Dr. Gilda Barabino. Dr. Barabino got her bachelor's degree in chemistry from Xavier University in Louisiana, her PhD in chemical engineering from Rice University. She started her career at Northeastern University Chemical Engineering Department, where she rose to the rank of full professor, and then she moved to Department of Biomedical Engineering at Georgia Tech and Emory as a full professor, where she also was the associate chair for graduate studies, and then to her current position, where she is the Dean of Engineering and Berg Professor at the School of Engineering at the City College of New York. Dr. Barabino has appointments in biomedical engineering, chemical engineering, and the School of Biomedical Education. She is an accomplished researcher in sickle cell disease and cell and tissue engineering. She is also the past president of BMES and the upcoming president of AIMBI. Dr. Barabino has worked, besides her research, at a lot of initiatives for women and minority faculty. Thank you, Dr. Barabino.
Well, good morning. I'm delighted to have the opportunity to share with you a little bit about my own career path and some of my ideas that I've formulated over the years about factors that influence career choices and career progression. So I'll start out just telling you a little bit. Let's see. A little bit about my own experience. I actually worked in industry for 3 years at Roman House, a chemical company, after I obtained my doctorate from Rice in 1986. And during that time, I enjoyed my time in industry, but I actually felt that the academic environment might have been a better place for me for career-long activities. And part of the draw was I was very interested in being back in the classroom, interacting with students, and being in the research environment that was not just around research and development around products, but research that maybe had more basic implications. And I share with you here some of the firsts that I've achieved in my career, because it actually does impact some of the things about career choices and how I experienced my career in the academy and moving forward. So I was the first African American admitted to the graduate program in chemical engineering at Rice University. And as I went on through my career, being the first in many positions, it really did impact the way I experienced my career, because if you're in a sort of pioneering role, it really makes a difference in terms of representation. Sort of in many ways you know that you're setting the stage for those who are coming behind you, and it certainly has influenced a lot of my career choices. So I mentioned that I was interested in thinking about and sharing with you some of the factors that influence career choices and career progression. I've also started looking in the literature and have published in this area around factors that influence career progression, and particularly from the lens of a minority female in the field. So one of the areas that I've looked at and have studied myself is how does identity influence career progression? And there's different things about how we identify both on multiple factors: race, gender, ethnicity, cultural environment, and so on. But those identities actually do impact very much in how you progress. And persistence is associated with your ability to identify with a chosen profession. And if you think about it, we form our identities and how we see ourselves as a scientist or an engineer very early on. And many of you probably have early experiences, and your parents can probably point out to you, maybe you were the one who walked around with the little medical kit, or maybe you were the one who was always trying to figure out how things worked, puzzles and so on. But I bring that up to you because it really, if you can tap into that, you heard from our previous speaker, like, how do you decide? What is it you want to pursue? If you can tap into those things that are very important to you and what your passions are, it will help guide you and give you the answers to where you want to go and how you want to spend your career. Other things that are important is recognition and role models. Think about some of the people that you've looked up to, people you want to emulate because you like what they've done with their career and how you like to move forward. Structural and interactional diversity is very important, and we know that being involved in and part of diverse groups, we come up with better solutions, and as engineers, that's very important to us. Structural diversity is just thinking about representation in numbers, but interactional means that you're actually building relationships with people from different groups. And we know we need a sustained culture of support and collaboration regardless of what type of career we follow, be it in industry or academics. I also wanted to mention mentoring, because mentoring comes up in the literature over and over again, and everyone will talk about how a mentor might have impacted their career. But mentoring is very much relational as well, and often the mentee, protege, and the mentor, it's very two-sided or a two-way street, and you can get as much out of it as a mentor as a mentee. And it's a very concrete mechanism for socialization into a profession, development, and retention along pathways. In engineering, I often think about the model for mentoring, and what happens is what they call a heroic journey. It's a sink or swim sort of mentality, which is also very prevalent in science and engineering, where it's this idea like, well, I did it, you can do it, you're sort of out there on your own. So regardless of what career path you choose, we do have to think about the models that we use in building careers, that they are collaborative and we have people that we can work with along the way. And it's not necessarily a solo adventure. And lastly, what I'll say about mentoring, there's a concept of self-mentoring, because often people talk about, like, what do you do if you can't find the appropriate mentor? And there's no such thing as only a single mentor. We all need multiple mentors who serve different roles and different purposes at different points of our career. But there is this concept of self-mentoring that I thought was interesting and worth sharing. It's a type of mentoring in which an individual cultivates his or her own professional growth through self-tutoring activities and resource-finding techniques. So self-mentoring requires the individual to be highly motivated and self-disciplined. The individual increases job effectiveness and augments professional talents by building a body of knowledge and skills without the aid of other people. You're always your own best advocate. You will be surprised at how much you know, and there's always resources that are out there available. And one of the things that I found early on in my career, particularly when I started as a new faculty member at Northeastern University in Boston in chemical engineering, I was the first African American that they had hired into that department. But when I got hired, I also was the only woman hired in. I was the only assistant professor. I was the only one with a young kid. So any way I could have been isolated, I was. I was the only one doing biomedical research. So I learned early on to be very resourceful. And I actually started studying social science literature at that time. I was trying to help inform myself of what is the best practices, what are some of the best ways to interact with this majority male environment that I found myself in, and how to understand social dynamics and organizational dynamics and how they impact careers. And it's interesting, I started that out as a new faculty member trying to figure out just more of a survival technique. But over the years, I developed that and used that in a way to help others, and have been running NSF minority faculty development workshops across the country since 2001. So there are many ways to integrate what you know to help others and also to make a difference as you move forward. So I'm just going to share a few things that I think are important about how do you successfully negotiate a career path. And this is, again, based on my own experience through my own lens. What I found for myself that was very important for me was educating, advising, and mentoring future generations. And I thought the best way I could contribute to do that was in the academy. I was interested in research with societal impact. The research that I started as a graduate student involved looking at the abnormal blood flow in sickle cell disease and employing chemical engineering principles to do that. I still do that work to this day, and I have an active research lab now, even as a dean of engineering. I realized the importance of self-direction, the importance of having inclusive excellence, and having the ability to drive innovation. So some of the keys that I think are important for success, you'll notice there's a common thread. You've heard these already in the previous talk. You have to have the ability to have some self-definition, evaluation, efficacy, and reliance, empowerment. But I'd also say we also need to have a degree of selflessness, giving back to others, giving to our field and our chosen profession. So that's important as well. And of course, the ability to guide your own career. We have to be able to avail ourselves of mentoring and professional development opportunities. When an opportunity knocks, you need to be prepared to answer. And we need to be collaborative and be able to work at the intersections of disciplines. And as biomedical engineers, we're very much prepared to do that. That's exactly what we do in our training and our work moving forward. You also have to be able to envision a plan for yourself. You do have to constantly think about the future, because the choices that you make now as senior graduate students, as postdocs, those choices really do impact the types of things that you are prepared for moving forward. And you have to learn from mistakes. If you've been doing a PhD, you should have already learned how to learn from mistakes. When we do research, there's more that goes wrong than that works. And then we learn how to learn from those mistakes and move forward and make a difference in what it is we're trying to do. And lastly, I wanted to share with you one thing to think about. How do you integrate your passion? Because part of how you decide where you want to go is what drives you, what motivates you, what are you passionate about? How do you integrate things like teaching, research, and other activities? So I'm just going to give you one example from my own career. I've been very passionate my entire career about biodesign for health and health disparities. And here's how I've been integrating all of those recently. So I'm, for the Biomedical Engineering Society, I'm working with the Coulter Foundation, and I'm the PI on our new initiative that's a $1.25 million grant that has at its core to use translation in medicine, design principles, teach those to use design towards health disparities. So engineering approaches to eliminate health disparities, and how can we do that with a partnership from BMS and the Coulter Foundation. At City College as Dean of Engineering, I've been instrumental in instigating a new Master's of Science in Translational Medicine, and part of what we're looking at in that program is to look at designs that apply to health disparities as well. I already mentioned to you the National Science Foundation funded Minority Faculty Development Workshop. And a recent project that I'm very proud of, we started an initiative with a partnership with the Dance Theater of Harlem, where I, on my own, just took a group of engineering students and said, you know, we need to integrate engineering and the arts. And I'm sure if we go down to the Dance Theater of Harlem, that you engineers can come up with a way to bring engineering technology that would be useful for the dancers. So the project that the students came up with, we call it Extend the Life of the Dancers. And so we went, we watched the dancers in rehearsal, we met with them, the students listened to what some of their issues were, and it came up that one of the big issues was around ankle injuries. The students on their own came up with this app where they would record the dancers. They'd have pressure transducers in there sewn into the socks that they were using in their ballet shoes. And they were matching up some of the movements with the measurements that they were taking, recording the dancers, and then the dancers were seeing at what points that they were actually having some issues around the ankles. And that project is still ongoing. And I share that with you because it has interdisciplinarity to it. It ties in diversity, inclusive excellence. It ties in my my position as a dean. It ties in my passion around expanding diversity, and it ties in education and research. So there are ways as we move through our careers to stay true to who we are, what our passions are, what drives us, and so forth. And the last thing I like to end with is do not ever lose your sense of humor. It's very important, and I draw on that all the time. Langston Hughes is my all-time favorite author because he was able to use humor to look at some of the very deep societal problems, particularly what African Americans experienced in America. And the quote that I like to give from Langston Hughes is that humor is laughing at what you haven't got when you ought to have it. So I'll end with that, and I'd be happy to take any questions that you have. Thank you very much. Is everybody headed to industry?
Hi, Gilda. How are you?
Hi, good, thanks.
When did you first realize that you were destined to go into academia? When did the light bulb come on for you?
So for me, I think the light bulb was always there, but I wasn't sure if I had the right preparation for it. And the reason why I say that is that I think the light bulb was always there. I always wanted to teach. That was my goal in life, to teach. As a matter of fact, when I started out at undergraduate, I thought I wanted to be an elementary school teacher. And when I showed a predisposition for doing well in math and science, everyone said, no, you got to go major in something else. But so I think that light bulb around teaching was always there. But I will share this with you because this was a career-impacting decision. So I had started out in chemistry, and then I did my doctorate in chemical engineering. So I was concerned that if I was coming out with all my training in chemical engineering, but at the academic level, but I had not worked as a chemical engineer. I was not a practicing chemical engineer. So I actually was very concerned. This was on my own, like no one was guiding me one way or the other. I was very concerned that if I'm going to be in the classroom and I'm teaching chemical engineers and I had not practiced as a chemical engineer myself, so I was the one who decided, oh, you know what, I'm going to go work as an engineer and get that practice. But then after I got in industry, I'm like, oh, I don't know, maybe I need to get back and teach, because that was the real thing that was driving me. So I started, I said I spent 3 years, so I started looking for academic positions, and I found that I really found the right place for me once I landed there. But I have to say, my industry experience was very useful. The first class I taught was chemical engineering, kinetics, and reactor design. And at Northeastern's a cooperative education school, so most of the students they rotated, being in class and then out on a co-op assignment. So by the time they got to their junior year, they had already, this is what I was teaching at the junior level, they had already had numerous co-op experiences. And in my first class, I had students who were challenging me about, well, you probably haven't seen a reactor, you know. Like, not only have I seen a reactor, students, I've been inside the reactors, like these large reactors at the plant. And I really did find that for me, I didn't know at the time how useful that industry experience would be for my entire career. But those kinds of decisions, I think we'll come to them and we'll see what's right for us at the right time. You should never feel that you're stuck. If you could go in one direction, it's always possible to go in other directions. And you should always feel that no matter what the experience was, it's something that you could learn from and use it later. And the last thing I'll say to you, since I have the floor for a minute, just by way of advice, even if you don't see now that an academic career is the thing that you want to do, the training, the kind of mindset you have if you thought you were going to go into the academy is so useful for an industry career. And I tell my students, regardless of what you think you want to do, I'm going to act like you're going into the academy, because you need independence, you need the communication, all the things that you already heard, all of the skill sets that were already presented, you need those regardless of what your career path is. So that was a long answer to your question, but I hope it gave a sense of some of the things that we should be thinking about career-wise. Thanks.
Interchange experts in industry and academia. However, I don't see Dr. Walt Baxter, who is supposed to be our third speaker, so I'm going to move on to our fourth speaker, whom I see here. My fourth speaker is Dr. John White. Dr. White got his bachelor's degree in biomedical engineering from Louisiana Tech and his PhD in biomedical engineering from Johns Hopkins University. He then followed up as a faculty, and where he rose to the rank of professor in bioengineering and director of the Brain Institute at the University of Utah. And then he moved to his current position, where he is professor and chair of biomedical engineering at Boston University. Dr. White is an expert in neural engineering, and he, with a goal to develop treatments for memory disorders and epilepsy. He holds professorships in several universities, including some abroad. He is a fellow of AMB and also a fellow of the Biomedical Engineering Society. Thank you, Dr. White. Slides. They should be on the desktop.
Okay, great. Bear with me here. I'm a Mac person, so that but hopefully I can translate my skills. There we go. Fantastic. All right, thank you for inviting me to speak here, and thank you for your attention. So I'm going to follow up on Gilda's advice. I agree with one of Gilda's last points that really I would argue the skill sets are very, very common, and there are small differences, or small to large differences, I suppose, in the day-to-day life and of an industry person versus an academic person, but really. We're seeing increasingly, and I think this is great for the field, that people are moving back and forth, and that's what we need to do as we continue to mature as a field. So my talk is going to be a little bit different from Gilda's. It's going to be focused on the question. I'm going to assume for a fraction of you that you've decided, okay, I do want to pursue an academic career, pretty much straight out of a postdoc. And I'm going to talk about I'm going to open up the hood, and we're going to talk a little bit about what the process is like and what's going on in those secret meetings that you don't get to attend. And I'm going to try, and the reason I'm going to do that is I'm going to help you put your best foot forward. That's my goal. So just a little bit on my story. As was mentioned, I got my bachelor's degree from Louisiana Tech in biomedical engineering, which was really a wonderful experience for me. And I decided pretty much as a sophomore in college that really academics was the world for me. I still love Louisiana Tech a great deal. And I thought, this is the life I want. I had a few industry jobs, mostly menial. I was a pretty young guy, of course. And I thought, I wanted to be in academics because of the sort of the freewheeling style of the academy. So I went to Johns Hopkins for grad school. I did a postdoc for a few years, and then I actually joined Boston University for several years, rose through the ranks, moved to the University of Utah for a while, and then came back to BU to be in my current position as the chair of the department. So. The current academic job department environment I would describe as extremely competitive in the sciences. So I work a lot with neuroscientists, sort of teams of scientists and engineers, and the neuroscientists actually are in a sense victims of their success in that it's such an exciting field that it's attracting tons and tons of great talent, which has made the job market in academics a bit of a challenge. But the good news for biomedical engineers is I think we actually have quite healthy job markets compared with many of our peers in both academics and in industry. And I think there are basically two simple reasons for that. One is that the departments are still growing. I hope that for those of you who are interested in academic jobs, there are a ton of jobs being advertised right now. I would say easily 100+ jobs at Research One institutions and lots of other kinds of academic jobs as well. And of course, industry has long since figured this out, with Medtronic being one of the leaders of this effort. They're hiring up our PhDs as well. So these are both good pieces of news. I would want to mention one thing. A lot of my close colleagues that I do research with and work on educational programs with are not in biomedical engineering departments. They're faculty in other departments, and this is quite common. Our mechanical engineers, our electrical engineers, a subset of them are my close colleagues on the projects that we're pushing forward. So keep those in mind if you're interested in academics. Don't basically look for the right kinds of ME or ECE type jobs, or ChemE type jobs. All right, how to get interviews. Be lucky. No, you should, the number one coin of the realm for research-focused departments is they're going to look at what you have published. They're going to look at how you have changed the world, and in particular how you might potentially change the research composition of the department much to the better. You're normally going to be doing a postdoc, although of course going to industry and coming back into academy is something we're very interested in as well. But if you go the postdoc route, you're going to be you've got to be doing something that's really, really exciting, and you've got to have an advisor who's looking out for your interests and who is very connected in the field, because those connections are going to matter. There's a lot of trust involved in making a high-level, expensive hire. And so if your advisor is a well-trusted member of the community, that really gives you the leg up. And as Gilda mentioned, you really want to look for somebody who's going to nurture you, because it's a long road, and you're going to need a lot of mentoring to get ready. And I would say apply pretty aggressively, but of course find the places that are the best fits for you. Because if everything works out well, we're hoping it's going to be, a decades-long commitment on both sides. So our system, because of we're in a relatively rapid expansion mode at BU. We have 3 entry-level tenure track positions open this year. So what we tend to do is start with creating a list of semifinalists, or finalists you might call them, and we interview them via Skype. And we're just trying to get a sense of a few things, and I'm going to try to help you get ready for one of these. And this really applies to both in-person interviews and these Skype interviews. So try to find out who you're going to be talking to as quickly as you can and know their work. I'm frankly amazed that a lot of candidates show up for these job interviews and have no earthly idea what the people who are going to make the decisions about them do. That's a real mistake. People like to know that you think their work is interesting and important. They're human beings, right? And so read their papers and be ready to talk to them about their own work, and particularly be ready to talk with them about how you can work with them and how you can help them. The kinds of questions you're going to get, you're always going to be asked about funding, because funding is the second critical part of our research, right? We have to publish well, and we have to be we have to be well funded so that we can support our students. Think about how you fit into the teaching mission. Most BME schools, much to their credit, take their education of their students very, very seriously. And finally, the answer to the last question is absolutely, this place seems like a great fit for me. I would love to live in this particular town. and of course, there are a lot of reasons. There are very different environments that I've lived in. Ruston, Louisiana is a wonderful town. Iowa City, Iowa, is the town where I met my wife. So I have quite fond feelings for that town. And Boston is fantastic, right? Boston is one of the great hubs of biotech in the world. So there are a lot of good reasons to like these towns, and you want to encourage them to believe that you might well take the job if offered it. Go through some mock interviews. You know, I really try to force my postdocs to do this because it's a learned skill how to interview. And you're gonna, if you get caught, you don't want to get caught flat-footed too much. So force your advisor and the other people in your labs to treat you as if they're interviewing you for the job. It makes a huge difference. These are small number of events, right? You might get, if a particularly hot candidate might get just a handful of interviews in a year, so you want to make everyone count by doing these mock interviews. And you know, this is kind of obvious advice, but I would say don't overdress, don't underdress. Feel comfortable. In my department, you don't have to wear a tie. If you're a man, you don't have to wear a tie, but it's fine if you do. You don't want to be so overdressed that you feel uncomfortable. But you know, I don't think it's going to be the make or break issue, but you got to look professional, right? You got to be confident and professional is what you're going for. And I'm sorry if that's condescending advice, but we have had people show up in like torn T-shirts for job interviews, and it's not a good look for that particular occasion. All right. An in-person interview. We do the in-person interviews with a fairly small number of finalists who really excite us for the in the Skype interview. And these are grueling days. So be rested and ready for these days. 30, 45-minute interviews, one after another, with people with super high IQs, and they're going to be, you know, a lot of them are going to be talking about their work. You've got to be ready to talk about their work. So get this list of people as quickly as you can, and so that you're ready. You know who you're going to meet with, and you know something about them. You're going to have a couple of dinners, likely, and these dinners are usually going to be with members of the search committee, the department chair, people like that. So people that have a lot of influence over the decision. That's actually usually one of the more fun parts. It's a chance for people to relax and get to know each other more broadly, find out about people's interests. There'll be some breakfasts and lunches, usually with groups of students, individual faculty. There's this seminar which is so critically important for the job that it's almost comical. If a great seminar is a really critical feature of getting an academic job. And there's often, almost always, something that we call a chalk talk, even though it's not often done in chalk, and it's more freewheeling, bouncing ideas off you, trying to get a sense of where you're going to take your research program and how you fit, again, how you fit in the university's, in the department's research environment, what you can do for them. Okay, so we've mentioned personal skills, and you know, those of you who are natural, I'm a natural introvert who has turned himself into an extrovert through years and years of practice. And I'm glad that I was able to do that because it really matters in the interview. So you're basically, you want to come across as friendly, helpful, competent, confident, but not arrogant. And each of those people is a person who you want to have at that, when those doors close and they make the final decision, stand up for you as the best candidate. I mentioned the confidence. It's going to be grueling, and so be ready. Stay composed. I've seen, especially in the chalk talks, things can get pretty crazy. So again, I think practice, right? The first time I gave a talk at a national meeting and somebody really came after me, I stood there blankly and turned red, right? You got to get, for most of us, you kind of have to get used to the idea that you could get aggressively challenged. So when you do those mock interviews, encourage your friends and lab mates to really be tough on you. Personal issues should not come up. It's illegal, as I understand the federal law, it's illegal for them to ask you questions about your sexual identity, whether you are pair bonded, whether you have children or plan to have children. It still comes up, but it shouldn't, but it still comes up. It's your job to bring in personal things. If you have a two-body problem, it's your job to figure out, it should be you that brings that up. I'm super careful, and I tell my faculty to be really careful. Don't talk about two-body problems. It's not right, and it's strictly speaking not legal. But it's on everybody's mind, because a large fraction of our candidates have two-body problems. You know what I mean by two-body problems, right? A partner. Yeah, you have a partner who you want to live with. I had a two-body problem. And you want to live in the same town, and you got to figure that out. And so often you're both, two-body implies that often you're both academics, which is really a challenge. Really a challenge to get two academic placements in the same town. Again, kind of obvious advice. I can think of one of my faculty members who loves to bring up the current presidential election with job candidates, and I look at him and I think, man, don't talk about that stuff, because we of course this is an impassioned time, and we all have I have extremely strong opinions about politics, but particularly this race. But it's best not to talk about it. So just don't talk about it. I can remember an odd story. I was on a search committee for another department, and the best candidate didn't get a job offer, I think, because of her views on the second Iraq War. No, the first Iraq War. It was the first Iraq War. And I thought, that, in my opinion, that was an unethical decision, but it does happen. So just, keep your cool about stuff like that. Dinners are fun. Don't drink too much. Okay, we're almost done. You've developed your new skills. Your postdoc really added something to your portfolio that you're going to bring to your new department. You have great public papers already published that they don't have to be in Nature or Science. They can be in a more specialized journal, but they need to be perceived by the people who are closest to you that these are really impactful papers. It's great if you have independent funding, and I know that's a tough bar to get over when you're a young person, but it's great. I really think seriously about these the K99 program, the Burroughs Wellcome Careers at the Interface. They fund a lot of BME work. If you have independent funding, you make the short lists practically based on that at a lot of schools. You've got a clear idea how to go forward, and this kind of gets to the point about your mentor. You also want to choose mentors who are going to let you pursue your vision of biomedical engineering and how to improve human health, and they're going to sort of leave that to you. So there's a clear plan that you need to articulate at your interview so that you're not competing directly with your National Academy member advisor. You can make a compelling case about that first grant. Oral communication skills are absolutely critical. Don't get too caught up in the weeds at your seminar, but when they come and when they ask you about the details, as they will, then be ready to talk about the details and make sure even the parts that were perhaps done by one of your lab mates that you're less familiar with, make sure you can talk intelligently about those parts of the work. Again, you want to be able to help your future colleagues, and personality matters a lot, and so you got to be cognizant of this point. Okay, so these are a few of my points about the jobs. Find a place that has the resources. Find a place that has excellent graduate students. For most young assistant professors, the graduate students are going to be the people that help you make your case if you're in a tenure track job for tenure in a few years. The culture of a department, absolutely critical. My department has a great culture for those of you who are interested in applying for jobs at BU. Most departments, actually, BME is generally a friendly and happy field. I think most departments, have supportive cultures, but keep that in mind, and be sure to ask about how they let you ramp up. In my department, we really try to leave the assistant professors somewhat free. If you don't want to be in a position where you're having to do too many things at once. Getting that research program established, getting your class, your sort of set of courses that you're good at is also critical. Clear metrics for tenure, another critical point. So you want to make sure that it's not completely mysterious what they're looking for in a tenured person. And finally, although chairs and deans have somewhat short half-lives, your relationship with the chair is going to be really critical, so at least make that initial condition. I've had several faculty candidates ask me how long I'm going to be around, And I think that's a good question. I appreciate that question. The ideal might be that you find the right chair that can get you through the tenure process. However, chair appointments tend to be shorter than the tenure clock, so that can be an issue, and that's why culture is important, because a department with a good culture will choose another chair perhaps that is also the right boss. Finally, go Red Sox. The right location is important. I wouldn't worry about it too much for your first job. You can be happy. I've been very happy in a wide variety of places in the United States and for shorter periods of time in other countries. But you know, the town does matter, and of course I sell our candidates on the idea that Boston is one of the ultimate places to be as a biomedical engineer. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
I have more of just a quick comment for everybody. So don't forget about the student luncheons that you go on. I am often one of those people, and everything you say does get back to the faculty people. So I've had candidates say that, you know, the reason that they're applying for this job, it's like lecture positions, it's the only job that they could find. Not a great thing to say, so just a reminder.
That is a great point. We pick those students carefully. We pick them to be impressive people. So you're an impressive person by definition if you do these lunches, and we do of course ask them, right? These students are part of the team. You can learn a lot from the students though, because they'll be a little bit more honest about the disadvantages of the place than most faculty are. Yes.
So for like one of the departments I'm in, when they bring in faculty candidates, they look at the number of papers they published. So then how do you compare a more computational person that can crank out 8 or 10 papers in a PhD to a molecular person that can only get out 2 or 3?
That's a great question. You know, we neural people envy the molecular people because we think they can publish faster than we can. It's a great question. If we have coverage in that area, then that helps us normalize to some degree. So we have both computational people and molecular people, and they're typically very well represented on the search committees, and thus they can help normalize for that. So we really depend on the people who are the trusted people who are experts to make up for that. There is no magic number of papers, but we do want to see that a person has kind of been continually productive given the speed at which things can happen in their subfield. Yes.
So kind of following along with that, given speed, is there a fine line between quality and quantity of papers?
Yeah, great question. I would say you want a little bit of both. Quality, and it could differ from department to department, but I would say for most, our Research One, fairly research-focused departments, I think they're looking for some really high-quality papers. Again, they don't have to be in super high-profile journals, although that certainly doesn't hurt, but they have to be in respected journals. Again, we normally hire in areas that we have expertise in already. So I know, for example, where the neural engineers might be publishing. Some of those journals don't have really high impact factors, but I know that they're journals with high standards. So you want to basically be in respected journals. If everything in respected journals, but not necessarily boutique journals. Yes.
Do you differentiate candidates based on if they stayed in biomedical engineering through graduate school, postdoc, even undergrad, compared to candidates that were, maybe in neuroscience or in biology that are transitioning to biomedical engineering? Yeah,
really good question. It is. I would say in general, BME departments. Gilda, I believe you said your bachelor's degree is in chemistry, correct? And that doesn't. I get the impression that biomedical engineering departments in general are a little bit less worried about your precise educational background. Our most recent hire, the first hire I made at the assistant professor level at BU has his PhD in chemistry, bachelor's and PhD in chemistry, but we knew that he would fit into our educational curriculum because of the nature of his work. So if you're a neuroscientist who's gotten into neural engineering, we may be wondering, well, will this candidate be able to teach for us, and and mentor work that's appropriate for engineers? But that can be based on the work that you've done and the skills that you have, rather than the specifics of your degree. Some departments may be a little bit more restrictive than that, but I think BME is. Would you agree, Gilda? Yeah, the BME is. We don't get too focused on the exacts of the degree. Oh yes.
During the interview process, you mentioned some bad things that you remember, so like the person wearing the red shirt.
Yeah.
Were there any really good things that stuck out to you that you still remember to this day as a candidate, either doing something or saying something during that process that to say you remember that?
Yeah, I would say that. You guys have great questions. I would say that what really strikes us very positively about candidates is that they have a passion for what they're doing and why they're doing it. And so, you know, for me, brain disorders, working on brain disorders, that's my passion. And we want to hear them talk about their passions. And sometimes it can be another kind of conversation. We talk about family, about life experiences. Those can also be very much positives. Yes.
Two-part question. First, what would you say about a candidate that has that most of their publications seem to be in collaborative fashion with other departments versus a postdoc PhD student that is doing a lot of his work or her work on their own? What would you say? What are you looking for more, or should there be a mix?
Right. I would say in the modern era, most work is pretty collaborative, and I don't think I would necessarily discriminate against a student or a postdoc who had done her work or his work in isolation, but I think it's quite common for work to be big as part of a big team. So what do we look for? We don't expect that you've done everything let's say you've got a 12-author paper, you were the first author or the co-first author or something like that. We don't expect that you did all the work, but we expect that you're quite familiar with all the work and that you could get that kind of work done even if you didn't specifically run those gels.
Secondly, I wanted to ask, you said about the quality of the paper. Do you mean more about the impact factor of the journal? Okay, it's 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, or necessarily how many citations you may get in that? You might not get enough citations.
Yeah, there's not enough time to gauge the number of citations. So it'd be great if we could do that, because that's a good measure. Again, it has to be corrected for field, normalized for the field. But there's not enough time for the work to have been cited, so we can't really rely on citations. Impact factor of the journal is somewhat important, but I would say what I really look for, if we're hiring a synthetic biologist, I trust my synthetic bioengineers, and I say, you know, look at this paper, read this paper, tell me, is this pointing in a really exciting direction? Again, there's no question that if you can get something in Nature, that's going to catch everybody's attention. But in my opinion, it's not at all a requirement. It's going to be the faculty in that area. They're going to read the papers and they're going to judge whether that work is excellent.
Thank you.
Yes, if you want to.
Based on your experience, how soon should we contact for the potential PI? It might be too soon. The big pause between the communication to the time to get to work with, or it's too late. So
You're talking about for a postdoc?
Yes, apply for postdoc.
Yeah, 6 to 12 months, I think, would be the kind of the common time. You contact them, you know, before 6 to 12 months before your defense, something like that. And you want to explain your reason why you're a great match for that lab.
I'm going to ask my three speakers to come and take their seats
last talk, so I don't know if he's caught up in another location. I haven't seen him since the beginning of the meeting, so we apologize about that. So please feel free to ask anybody what you want now that you've heard the three talks.
I had a question for all of you. So, have you ever dealt with imposter syndrome, and how has that affected your transition from your PhD to your first job?
Can you tell me what you mean by imposter syndrome?
Oh, sure. So, imposter syndrome relates to kind of confidence issues and how you can perceive yourself not to be successful because you're smart or because you're successful, but rather you feel like lucky that things just happen to work out and that you're not really meant to be in that position, but that people might find out that you're, I guess maybe not competent for that position, and that someone will discover you to be an imposter in that position.
I don't mind tackling that. So I like to reframe it a bit. I think everybody has a sense of often be found out, I don't know if that's easy, or also when you're moving from one level to another, you get to reach, so you're sometimes concerned about, am I ready for it? But I would say that rather than us thinking of it as an imposter, being an imposter, because I think that's real, the imposter syndrome is real. But I would say we should think of it more as we just maybe have not had the experience in that area yet, but we have the skill sets to grow into it. And if we look at it that way, we're less likely to feel like we're not ready. And there are some studies where they look at it based on gender. Men don't tend to have that, and they tend to think that they're ready when they're not ready. So I would say all of us would just think about, we all have that reach out there for us. You may be in one level, and then you're moving to the next one, at any transition point, as long as you keep that confidence and you have the skill sets to grow into it, I think that's a good idea.
I was perhaps the exception in that I had a lot of imposter syndrome, especially when I went to Hopkins. I felt I was this kid from this relatively obscure school, very unusual background for a future academic in economics, not in race and gender, but in terms of economic status. And with time, you just realize it's all going to be okay, and and you do your best, you make mistakes, and you get through it, and you are ready. And I'm sure that Gilda is right, that it's a far more common problem for women than it is for men in general.
Here's back to my speaker who just stepped in, and well, I want to welcome Dr. Baxter. Thank you all for coming in. And I don't know if I should, but that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go back to the slide, to the what was supposed to be who was supposed to be the third speaker. So my third speaker is, fourth now, is Dr. Walter Baxter. He is senior principal scientist at Medtronic. He is working at the neuromodulation division and the therapy delivery division. He got his bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering from Georgia Tech and his PhD from UC San Diego, bioengineering. He is involved in advisory boards of Georgia Tech, biomedical engineering, and many advisory boards from universities at the University of California system. He's been very involved in mentoring engineering students in different parts of the country, involving North Carolina State University, and he is an elected fellow of AIMBY. Thank you, Dr. Baxter.
Thank you so much, Lily. Okay, I am extremely sorry for showing up so late here to this session, and it sounded like there were some wonderful discussions going on. So in the interest of time, I think I'll just maybe talk a little bit kind of towards the end of this discussion. One of the things that I think can be a little bit depressing that maybe my colleagues here haven't quite touched on yet, and again, apologize for the late arrival, I was helping out with another session, is the job description itself. Am I correct? Have we hit that nail on the head yet? This is something that I talk with students quite a bit about. And I want to be clear, the last question was great about imposter syndrome. Am I ready? Am I good enough? Yet another piece of weaponry that will be leveled at your self-esteem is the job description, okay? And I want to talk about that very clearly, particularly for people with graduate degrees who have essentially dug a hole and gotten very specific about one particular topic that they're interested in. Because if you think about it for a second, what you're being asked to do is go from a very narrow description of your work to a more general kind of sort of set of skills that you could use to help out a Johnson & Johnson or some sort of industrial group that wants to do things in a lot of different directions, right? So I wanted to tell you that, I guess, 2 weeks now, or maybe a week ago, I typed in tissue engineering in Medtronic's search page just to see what would pop up. As many of you know, you may not know this, but Medtronic is a medical device manufacturer, not a manufacturer of tissue engineered products. There aren't so many of those, especially on a large scale. There certainly are opportunities out there, but I wager that some of you in here have done something like tissue engineering. Can I see some hands for anybody who's done anything? Good. So you may wonder, wait, hold on. There isn't Tissue Engineering Incorporated is not out there, right? So what did I find? I found a lot, and I'll let you guys go check that out. This is not a pitch for a particular company. I'm just saying, please, type in a few descriptions of your skills, take a look at what comes at you, and think a little bit more broadly about how what you have done fits into a particular fit. This will take time. But I was surprised to see a number of really good opportunities for people who know how to do tissue engineering. This is a design engineer role, and I can't remember what group it is in, but it's fairly representative of design roles that are available. The title of this role is a senior R&D design engineer, which would be appropriate for somebody with a graduate degree. We'll get to that in a second. I find this to be mind-boggling. This is the job description, okay? And let me be very clear. Someone with even a few years of experience has not done all of these things, okay? I want you to see the world a little bit differently. 50% of this really matters to somebody who's looking for talent, and we don't know what 50% it is, okay? So please, if you see fairly good agreement between your skill sets and a description on a St. Jude Medical webpage, please apply, right? Don't let St. Jude reject you. Don't let yourself reject yourself, if that makes sense. Okay. One thing I'm very happy to point out is that in the last 5 years, we finally see biomedical engineering specifically called out in job descriptions, okay? I don't think this is just a Medtronic thing, but I point it out because I want you all to know that many of you are experts in biomechanics or signal processing, computer science, etc. Please don't be afraid to apply for an engineering role that doesn't specifically call out biomedical engineering if that's what you are very good at. Okay? So my moral is, unless this is a job that looks completely out of your universe, please apply, because it can start a conversation about where you really fit within a company. I hope that's helpful. And I think I'll just stop there and pass it back to the panel and take some questions. Thank you.
Questions either to the panel or specifically to Dr. Meister?
I have a broader question that I think is targeted more towards academia, but from industry it might be applicable too. How much flexibility do you see in after you're applying, when they get back to you, hopefully it's a good case, but in negotiations? So how much of is negotiable in terms of, and I don't just mean salary, I mean like, freedom to, pursue your research interests, and this might be appropriate for industry too. Thank you.
So from an industrial perspective, it's definitely a negotiation, right? We're trying to see if you're a match with what we have, and you're trying to see if we're a match for what you have, and then when we put out an offer, we usually give it quite a bit of thought. It's kind of better to have those conversations before an offer letter goes out, because that can shape then what we counter offer. And then, in terms of like pursuing your own research interests in an industrial position, it sort of depends on how you were going to do that and what flavor it was in the posting that you were applying for.
I'd also have on the academic side about negotiations, everything negotiable, but there's a lot that's constrained by resources. So if you're negotiating with an institution that's just dramatically strapped for resources, I don't care how good a negotiator you are, there's only so far you're going to get. And so I think that's something to take into account. And in the academic side, people are also looking at what do you really need. So you want to make sure you're very clear about what you need to be successful, and you don't want to accept anything less than that. But at the same time, they're looking for the candidate to be reasonable. So if someone, they know your research area, there are other people who, have done the same kind of thing. So if somebody comes in and say, you know what, I need $1 million for this one piece of equipment, and if you can't do that, I'm not coming. They're like, you are so out of whack, and you don't even understand. So they're not going to take you seriously. But I think it is about what do you need to be successful, and you don't want to accept less than that.
Yeah, I just had a question about going back and forth between academics and industry. I know some of you have experience. Could you maybe talk a little bit more about that, or about the ease of specifically maybe doing industry first and then going into academics? Because you at industry you may have stopped publishing for a little bit, or just about that a little bit.
That is a challenge. Oh, this microphone does work. You just have to stick you got to be really close. So that is a challenge because, as you're right, a lot of industry jobs, people don't publish as much. So it takes a confident and department that knows what they want to judge each candidate by independent criteria. So at Utah, we made a tenure track hire that really revolutionized the way we were. His name is Bob Hitchcock. He's at this meeting. I'm embarrassing him. He revolutionized the way we taught our seniors because he had so much industry experience, and we did have to understand that his publication record is going to look different. But it was a brilliant hire that I plan to try to do the same thing at Boston University.
I don't mind adding to that. So John's right about early in his talk, he said that it's starting to happen more. There's more of the transferring back and forth. But I can tell you a couple of rules of thumb, because being able to publish is a big deal. And so in industry, you're constrained, and there's, things are proprietary, and you can't necessarily get it out. And in academics, they're looking at your publication record. So here's some rules of thumb around that. If you get out with your PhD, or you've done your postdoc and you're in industry and you're thinking about moving to academia, there's a window of about 1 to 3 years or so. Within the 3-year time frame, you're not so far out that it's such a huge problem, and people will factor that in, especially and this is just a given, you have to have had some publications out of your thesis and hopefully something out of a postdoc. But so there's that kind of wiggle room there. And then on the other end of the spectrum, what happens is if you are in industry and you're thinking about academics, usually your next window of opportunity to make a switch is after you've made some impact and became known for something in industry, and that takes a lot longer, particularly since you're not publishing. So they're okay with in academics if you're not publishing, but you had to have been in industry long enough to have really made an impact in that area that you were responsible for, and that could be like 12, 15 years. And so people like that who come in to academic settings really can have a huge impact on their departments, and people know that. But the last thing I'll say too, because I wanted to say this earlier, to think about the first job you take. It really is important in the sense that, did you start in industry? Because I just explained what happens with that. Did you start in academia? You want to go the other way? Traditionally, people say it's easier to go from academe to industry than to go from industry to academe. And the other thing that I've learned throughout my career, you might be okay with, you know, I was all right. That choice, I want to change it now. It's not bothering me to go do something totally different. But the people who are trying to hire you are really looking at, well, what have you done already? What was your first job that you took? And they sort of pigeonhole you a bit and say, all right, you chose that, that's your path. So even in industry, if it's, when you're trying to move, if you're trying to move from one thing to something totally different, there's this, well, wait, because we're trying to hire somebody who already has expertise in this area. So it's difficult to make big changes. And maybe someone from industry can say a little bit more of that.
So I'd probably agree with Gilda. It's maybe easier to go from academia to industry. Although, say, if you have 5 or 10 years in academia, if I was a hiring manager, I'd want to see that the stuff you had done was very applied. Because otherwise you'll get frustrated in the industrial world, because you're not going to be able to do research at a fundamental level, at least generally not. People I've seen who've come from academic careers into Medtronic, they're usually brought in to start a new competency or set up a lab or to establish a new direction. So it's very much, we need that expertise, bring it in, but it's also people who absolutely know how to deliver to timelines and schedules and applications of what they're doing.
The only topic we haven't touched on. So first of all, I don't think anyone at the panel here has started in the academy and moved, started in an industry role and moved back into the academy, other than how many years? 3 years. So that's, your point is very well taken. It's a short time frame. It's a really great question. The other thing we haven't touched on is the growing trend to have seasoned industry professionals come on campus to start something like a new design initiative. These so-called professors of practice, kind of usually someone mid-career, late career, who can come in and inject some of that, say, product development process sort of expertise that doesn't generally come out of a bioengineering department. Those are some new opportunities. I think that's going to grow, but it's not a giant opportunity yet for people. Yeah, so the question is, your first job typically comes from a personal connection, and that's the gentleman's dead on. That's right. Many of us aren't lucky enough to have a personal connection at a place where you'd love to work, but many of us in the room work at wonderful institutions that have been churning out engineering students and graduates for many years. So I usually tell people, in addition to the usual professional societies that can provide a nice network like BMES, certainly try the electronic LinkedIn sort of things. But I usually encourage people to reach out directly to alum that work at firms that where they would like to work. That's easier with a large company than it is with a small company. But I think that's a great strategy for trying to move into a place where you know a few people, particularly for postdocs and PhDs, where a translator who can take your very specific skills and expand those to other roles that are at the company. Those are people who can really make a difference for you in unexpected ways. Great question.
Yeah, so I had a question more building off your answer to the previous question, and it has to do with kind of bridging that gap. And I don't mean bridging the gap on the research side between industry and academics, but someone who's interested in teaching but really has no desire to take that PI role, right? So would like to actually practice as an engineer and be on the industry side, developing products, doing design, but would also like to spend some time in the classroom. And I think this is a question that hopefully both sides of the table can answer.
I'll take the first crack and then pass it to John and Gilda. So I have been very fortunate to have supervisors, again, at a large company, so maybe this is a unique perspective, who actually encourage us to go give guest lectures and interact with students and do things like you're talking about. To be really fair, it's once every 3 months, every 4 months. It's very infrequent. But for me, that kind of scratches the itch of getting in front of bright young students and kind of feeding off of that energy a little bit. And I do feel that, that's very highly appreciated by our friends in academia. So that's my perspective on the industry side, and I'll just pass it down. I wonder if you guys want to.
I'll just add a little bit. I mean, another route in the industry side, and I've done it a few times, is you get associated with the university and their senior design programs or graduate programs where they have like a design team or a capstone project. If you become an advisor for that project, you're essentially acting as a mentor and a teacher to those students, which might feed that need or desire too. And there's also adjunct professor positions that are perfectly doable with another full-time job.
Adjunct positions are increasingly being used in academic institutions as budgets get tighter, enrollments go up, and you still have the need to deliver these courses, but also the increasing recognition of what the industry expert brings to the table around the practice. Students want more and more, how am I going to use this? What's experiential? Like, what's more practical, not just what's in the classroom? So there is a lot of growth around hiring adjuncts who are full-time practitioners in industry, and they may teach a course a semester or a course a quarter or something like that fits in. Their adjunct pay is not high, but many of the people in industry who are working as adjuncts are doing it for their love of teaching and giving back to the profession.
Yes, I don't have too much to add, but I agree. If we are eager for adjuncts with industry experience, we have lots of opportunities because our students are hungry. 50% of our students go straight into industry jobs, 50% of our BS graduates. So we are eager to give students that kind of experience. You do have to recognize that academics, that the pay is going to be low compared with the typical industry standard. I've been delighted to find out that has not, that somewhat low pay, it's not ridiculous, but it's somewhat low, it's quite low, that has not really that hasn't prevented a lot of really high-level people from helping us out.
Just to add something throughout all of the student chapters, they are encouraged to contact local universities, they bring in speakers, we have a lot of guest lecturers from industry as part of our courses at the universities. There is a big tendency to facilitate the students to reach out to industry, and the BMS expects this from the student chapters as part of their industrial connection activities. So, one question for the panel.
This is related to industry. I noticed that in the entry-level positions, we would like to have 2 to 3 years of experience attached to that job posting. But as a newly graduated PhD student that doesn't have industry experience, you first have to get the job first. What is the best way of getting that first job without having that internship internship or a co-op or that experience?
Start?
Sure. Either one of us will probably give the same answer. So the question in the back of the room was, I see a lot of job descriptions that say 2 to 3 years of experience required. I think that's a boilerplate thing that people put on job descriptions because they'd like to have some experience for people. And frankly, some of the research that you all are doing in world-class laboratories is as good as or better than some of those 2-year experiences. But certainly don't take that for granted. Applying with a PhD experience for 5, in my case 6+ years, the onus is on us as researchers to explain the project management skills that you developed, some of the communication work that you've done, presenting your work, kind of some of the skills that you may take for granted as you make your way through your process. Those are the things, that's the code word we use when we say 2 to 3 years of work in industry. A lot of that is how do you interact with small teams? Can you take your skills and apply them to a project? Does that make sense? Okay.
Yeah, and I'd echo everything Walt just said. And often, if I was just posting a position, and the number of years experience relates to the kind of level of education. We almost count the PhD program as a couple of years of experience, depending what the topic was. Like if a senior level position like Walt was putting up, it might say BS with 4 years of experience, or it may say PhD with, straight out of school. So you just kind of look for that sort of thing too.